What's that sound? It's for amusement only, the EM and Bingo Pinball Podcast. Welcome back to For Amusement Only. This is Nick Baldridge. I got an email from Creditdotpinball who asks what my thoughts are on why and how Williams went to the DC Pops, Flippers, and Slings. Well, let's start off with the why. There's an engineering reason, potentially, and there is a practical reason, which go hand in hand, really. But the practical reason is to draw players in. If you play a game and the Pops react the same way every single time and fling the ball with an equivalent amount of force with every single hit, if the Flippers hit consistently, powerfully, every single time, are you more likely to put a coin in that or a game where everything is AC? Things do not act consistently because, of course, there's a negative part of the AC cycle. And things have less power because of that fact. So it's a competition thing. That's the practical purpose. Now, for the engineering purpose, and this is all guesswork, but if you have a machine which is significantly complex, and you have electricity which is running all through the machine, it's being stepped down from 120 volts down to, say, 24 volts. Well, that 24 volt common is going to tie to every single coil in the machine. Let's take a look at the Williams games that were made during this era, and I think you'll start to understand why it may be necessary to have its own dedicated circuit to drive these high-power, incredibly important pieces of the system. Most of these games were 4-player games. In a 4-player game, you have 4 sets of score reels. You have chimes, which are driven with 3 different solenoids. You have playfield activity. During this era, there was a lot of experimentation with gates and special features which were activated by a particular solenoid. And then you have the normal options on the playfield, such as flippers and slings and pops. Now, every single one of those coils has to be driven from the 24 volt system, not to mention the score motor and any relays which are underneath the playfield. So basically you've got a line, and that line has to go to X number of items. At some point you get a reduced effect based on the number of links in your chain. If you think about it like modern computers, for those of you that work inside of computers, you know that computers have power supplies, and over the years you've seen them change and evolve to have multiple 12-volt rails. The reason this is necessary is to support multiple spinning disks or multiple graphics cards or multiple whatever peripheral you can think of. Well, it's the same kind of idea. You have a separate 24-volt circuit that drives these dedicated coils and ensures that they pop with the same amount of force every single time. So The engineering reason, and again, this is speculation, I would have to, sit down and actually do math. But if you have all of these coils tied together and you start to see a drop in power that's able to be transferred quickly to those coils where you expect power to be transferred quickly, this is one way to engineer around it. Now, let's talk about the how. This is interesting. Williams used the same 24-volt winding on the transformer in order to power the bridge rectifier that it used. Now, the bridge is separately fused, and if it shorts, then the idea is it takes out the fuse before it takes out coils. It also prevents that circuit from feeding back into the 24-volt line when it should not. So this bridge rectifier is a full wave rectifier, meaning that it makes the current that's fed in as smooth as possible before feeding it to the coils. This is done with 4 diodes which are arranged back to back to back to back. And this is the same type of bridge rectifier that you see in modern solid-state games. Now, if these go bad, then not only is it possible that you'll blow a fuse, not even necessarily any time those are activated, but anytime they can become active, meaning anytime the game is actually started, it can blow that fuse. The other thing that can happen is really odd, unpredictable behavior. If the bridge has partially failed, then things are going to act really weird, and it may not actually blow that fuse. In order to test a bridge rectifier, you have to take it out of the circuit and test point to point to point to point to see if any of the diodes are open. Once you've done this, you should know if the bridge is good or bad. Now, I think this was a pretty darn good idea on Williams' part in order to stay competitive with Gottlieb. Now, I seem to recall that Gottlieb did something similar, but it was much, much later. Williams was doing this in the 60s. Playing a DC versus an AC game is certainly markedly different. However, playing a Williams game versus any other game is certainly markedly different in feel. As I've mentioned before, Williams EMs feel a lot more industrial or cold than their Bally or Gottlieb counterparts. And partially this is due to how the mechanisms are constructed. But perhaps partially it's due to the DC-driven coils which the player interacts with most often. Playing with the properly rebuilt set of AC flippers and playing with a rebuilt set of DC flippers, you can certainly tell a difference, but the difference is going to be less noticeable if your flippers have been rebuilt properly. Now, if there's slop in the mechanism, you'll notice that too, and fairly consistently with the DC flippers. AC flippers are a little more forgiving. But that's all for tonight. I hope I answered your question, Creditdotpinball. Thank you for your submission. My name again is Nick Baldridge. You can reach me at foramusementonlypodcast@gmail.com, or you can call me on the Bingos line. That's 724-BINGOS1, 724-246-4671. You can listen to us on iTunes, Stitcher, Pocket Casts, via RSS, on Facebook, on Twitter at Bingo Podcast. You can follow me on Instagram at nbaldridge, or you can listen to us on our website, which is foramusementonly.libsyn.com. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll talk to you next time.